Morning. It's an honor to be with you today as the Ambassador of the United States of America. The reception by the Australians I've received since my nomination, my arrival this morning, is humbling. Riding in Her Majesty's Rolls Royce was something for a farm boy from Tennessee. I could never imagine such an honor. I would very much like to thank the Governor General and all Australians for their very warm welcome. Also would like to thank Jim Caruso, our Deputy Chief of Mission, for his leadership and his support. I'm here today to talk about and because of the importance of the partnership and the alliance of our two countries. After the President offered me the opportunity to consider this position, I took a tour of Canberra. I came here in September. I had never visited your capital, and I thought it was important to do so before making my decision. It was arranged for me to lay a wreath at your war memorial. In my capacity as a former Reagan administration official. After participating in that ceremony, after touring your war museum, after having guides talk about the relationship and the alliance of our country since World War I, as I exited the War Memorial, looking out at Parliament House over Lake Burley Campbell, I then and there decided that I would go forward. I then and there decided that serving as the 26th United States Ambassador to Australia would be the capstone of my career. I've never regretted that decision. Be happy to try to take your questions.
Sorry, if we could start.
Ambassador, we've had quite a few false starts about the President coming to visit Australia. Can we expect President Trump to visit Australia, and why has it taken so long?
The President's got a busy schedule. In talking to the White House before I left, that is still an option that's being considered. I do expect a number of very senior administration officials with whom I met to visit Australia this year. I would expect that there will be further meetings between the President and the Prime Minister of Australia, whomever he or she may be. This present schedule is still being negotiated, still being formulated.
Thanks. Tom Eagleton, ABC.
Mr. Ambassador, over here. As I'm sure you're aware, you've arrived in the shadows of a federal election coming here. There have been some warnings from our security agencies about potential foreign interference in our political processes. Is that something the embassy here is keeping an eye on, and what learnings will the administration share with Australia in this regard, so far as your own experience goes?
Well, first and foremost, we're making sure that I'm careful not to interfere in your election. So that's one reason, frankly, that it was that the process to get me over here was rushed. I haven't gone to ambassador school, frankly. So if I breach any protocol, it's because the State Department made the decision that we wanted the U.S. ambassador to Australia here sooner rather than later, so I could meet with current government officials and shadow government officials to before you get to election mode. In terms of foreign interference, we've had issues in the United States, and we will share, of course, with our Australian allies and partners our experience, and of course we will continue to share any and all intelligence in that regard.
Steve Evans, Canberra Times.
2 years ago, the Kim regime in Pyongyang tested missiles capable of carrying a nuclear warhead and of reaching all of Australia. Does that threat still exist?
I don't know. frankly. I have no reason to think it doesn't still exist. But that is something that I'm sure that our intelligence in that regard has been shared with the Australian officials. It's not something I'm the ambassador to Australia. I'm not Steve Began involved in those negotiations. So I would just have to say that I'll refer you to those who are in that knowledge loop.
Primrose Reardon, the Australian.
Thank you, Ambassador. Can I ask, one thing that's weighing on minds here is the US-China trade negotiations. Could any US-China trade deal have any unpleasant surprises for allies? And for example, could Chinese purchases of LNG and beef hurt Australian exporters?
I believe that we are consulting with our allies, and they are getting real-time readouts of those negotiations. I know that your government officials and embassy officials are in close contact with Secretary of Commerce Wilbur Ross, with Bob Lighthizer, the U.S. Trade Representative, and others. And I believe and I'm hopeful that the concerns and the interest of the Australians are being taken into consideration. But ultimately, it's a presidential decision and a decision by people in Washington. So let's keep our fingers crossed.
Jonathan Lee, Channel 10.
Ambassador, firstly, welcome and congratulations. The US is considering new cost-sharing arrangements where allies will pay more for American military in their countries. Could this apply to the Marines based in Darwin? Could it? Should it?
I think no. I have no reason to believe. I just came out to Indo-Pacific Command. There was no mention of that, and by the people on the ground and who were responsible for that Marine rotational force. If ultimately it's a decision by the Pentagon, but I think Australia is doing its fair share in that regard.
David McCullough, AP.
Close enough. Ambassador, what do you view your role as the US seeks to withdraw troops from the Middle East in keeping Australia in the loop? And we've noticed in recent days that the Morrison government has some reluctance in taking responsibility for foreign fighters captured by Kurdish troops. What can you do to talk the Australian government around to repatriating those in custody?
It's a very good question. I'm still finding my role, but I was privileged to sit in on the meeting with Foreign Minister Payne and Secretary Pompeo. These issues were discussed, and I think will continue to be discussed at that level. And I would look forward to facilitating continuation of those discussions.
Brett Mason, SBS.
Mr. Ambassador, welcome.
Welcome. Thank you.
An Australian citizen, Julian Assange, has been holed up in the Ecuadorian embassy in London now for several years. Do you believe the WikiLeaks founder should be prosecuted in the United States for publishing classified US government documents?
That's a decision for my good friend Bill Barr, the new Attorney General, and the United States Department of Justice, and I'll defer to those decision makers. I have great confidence that Bill Barr will make the appropriate decision and will after appropriate consultations.
Stephen Jedgetts, ABC.
Ambassador Mike Pence has made it very clear he has concerns about Chinese, as he calls it, debt trap diplomacy.
Yes.
Do you have concerns as well in the Pacific?
Yes.
Can you elaborate on what those concerns are and what steps will you take as ambassador to try and get Australia in particular to do more to ensure that Pacific countries aren't drawn into debt traps?
This was an issue that I briefly discussed with the Vice President. He was kind enough to swear me in. I've known the Vice President for some time. I would use stronger language. I would use payday loan diplomacy. But I think it's on us, all of the allies and the Western nations, Western or liberal democracies, to educate people about the dangers of these loans. The fact that the money looks attractive and easy up front, but you better read the fine print. And I think we already have done a good job, the Australians and the United States and others, in educating targets of that activity.
there's been a decrease in the amount of loans since 2016. Do you believe that that message then is filtering through potentially?
I hope so. I hope so.
Andrew Tillett, AFP.
AFR, Australian Nature Review, thank you. Welcome to Australia, Ambassador. The US Navy has conducted regular sail-throughs in the South China Sea of within 12 nautical miles of disputed territories that have been created by China. Would you like the Australian Navy to do similar operations? Is that something you'll be pressing with both the government and the opposition? We should do the same things.
That's ultimately a decision for the Australians. The Australians have been very supportive of freedom of navigation, freedom of skies, and in the Indo-Pacific region. I believe they will continue to be supportive. I think any further such operations, we will continue to consult, and we'll make those, and the appropriate decision makers will make those decisions as we go along. But I certainly don't have that brief with me in my briefcase. Okay.
Fiona Willen, Channel 9.
Hey, Mr. Ambassador, welcome.
Hi.
My question's about China. So it seems America always assumed that China would become more democratic as it became wealthier. Can you just read that?
Well, I think we're an optimistic nation. We hope for the best. I spent as a lawyer representing U.S. investors investing in China, as a lawyer who ran our law firm, who opened offices in Shanghai and Beijing and already had an office in Hong Kong. I was optimistic. I think significant strides were made. I would like to return to those days. It's the market economy, but more importantly, a rules-based regime that is transparent and non-coercive, I think is beneficial to everyone, including China, if we can get them to that place.
We have time for one more question. Rob Taylor, Wall Street Journal.
I just wanted to ask, you mentioned that there'll be some high-level visits coming through here, but we're already seeing some high-level visits from the US being stepped up through the Pacific. I just wondered, that's being interpreted by some as a sort of sign of increasing alarm in Washington about China in the Pacific. Can you give us your readout? What's your concern? How do you see the sort of landscape out there at the moment?
I don't think it's increasing alarm about any particular country or entity. I think what it reflects is the fact that the Indo-Pacific region is becoming increasingly important. 42% of the world's population is here. So much of the commerce comes from this area. As the United States is reassessing now that we have the latitude, frankly, to reassess, more people are realizing that we need to spend a lot of time and attention in this area. I think Vice President Pence feels particularly strongly in that regard, and you'll be seeing a step up. But it's not alarm. It is just the new priority and interest in making sure that we're a Pacific nation too, and maybe we need to spend more time focusing on our own self-interest. That's how I would say. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Ambassador.
Thank you. Look forward to continuing these discussions.
Excited?
Pardon?
You excited or nervous?
Both. More nervous than excited right now. That it took me a while when I was White House counsel to become comfortable dealing with the press. Marlon Fitzwater, I'd been there who was the press secretary, I'd been there 6 months before I gave my first press interview. So Gavin's got me here in 3 days. So okay, take care. Bye.